Artificial intelligence is going to transform medicine, that's the promise you hear everywhere, from breathless headlines to billion-dollar startups. Some of it is real and already happening. A lot of it is hype. This series separates the two, where AI is genuinely helping doctors and patients today, where it's overhyped, and where it's genuinely headed. Let's start with the big picture, what AI is actually good at in medicine, and why. To understand where AI helps, you first have to understand what it actually is, because the popular image is misleading. Today's medical AI is not a robot doctor that reasons through a case like a physician. At its core, it's a pattern recognition engine. You train it by showing it enormous quantities of data, millions of X-rays, or pathology slides, or patient records, each labeled with the right answer. And it gradually learns the statistical patterns that connect the input to the answer. That's the whole trick. It doesn't understand medicine the way a doctor does, it recognizes patterns, often ones that are too subtle, too fast, or too numerous for any human to catch. Once you see AI as a spectacularly good pattern matcher rather than a thinking machine, it becomes clear exactly where it will shine, and where it will struggle. So where does a superb pattern matcher help most in medicine? 4 places, and they map directly onto the rest of this series. First and biggest, reading medical images. X-rays, CT scans, MRIs, pathology slides, these are pure pattern recognition problems, and it's exactly where AI is furthest along and most deployed. Second, sifting through huge volumes of data that would overwhelm a human, flagging high-risk patients in a sea of records, watching vital signs around the clock, predicting who's about to deteriorate. Third, automating the drudgery, the mountains of paperwork and documentation that burn doctors out, which AI can now handle, giving time back to patient care. And fourth, finding the needle in the haystack, the subtle early tumor, the rare disease, the faint signal a tired human eye might miss. Notice the theme, these are tasks of perception and volume, not deep reasoning. Just as important is knowing where AI struggles, because that's where the hype outruns reality. AI is weak at genuine reasoning, working through a truly novel case it wasn't trained on. It lacks context and common sense, it doesn't know the patient's life story, their fears, or the 1,000 unspoken cues a good doctor reads in a room. It can be confidently, dangerously wrong, stating a fabricated answer with total conviction. And because it learns from historical data, it can absorb and amplify the biases baked into that data. Crucially, it can't be held accountable, and it can't provide the empathy, judgment, and human connection that are the heart of medicine. This is why the realistic framing, and the one this series takes, is that medical AI is a powerful tool that augments clinicians, not a replacement that reasons like one. The doctor plus the AI beats either alone. So here's the frame for everything that follows. The question that generates endless hype and fear, will AI replace doctors? Is mostly the wrong question. The useful question is far more specific and far more answerable, which particular tasks can AI actually do well, safely, and today? Reading a chest X-ray for a specific finding? Increasingly yes. Writing the visit note? Yes, and it's spreading fast. Independently diagnosing a complex patient and taking responsibility for it? Not remotely close. Over the rest of this series, we'll go area by area, medical imaging, pathology, diagnosis, documentation, drug discovery, genomics, chatbots, hospital operations, and for each one ask that honest, specific question. Along the way we'll cover the real risks, how these tools get regulated, and where this is genuinely heading. No hype, no doom, just what the evidence actually shows. This is an educational overview of the technology, not medical advice. If there's one place AI has truly arrived in medicine, it's imaging. Radiology, reading X-rays, CT scans, and MRIs, is where the vast majority of real, approved medical AI lives today. As of 2026, of over 1,500 FDA-cleared AI medical algorithms, roughly 3/4 are for radiology. This is the flagship. Let's understand why imaging is AI's sweet spot, what these tools actually do, and their real limits. Why has imaging, of all fields, become AI's beachhead in medicine? 2 reasons, and they follow directly from episode 1. First, a medical image is fundamentally just a large grid of pixels, and detecting a disease in it, a nodule in a lung, a bleed in a brain, a fracture in a bone, is a pure visual pattern recognition task. That is precisely what modern AI, and the deep learning techniques behind it, do better than almost anything else. Second, and just as important, there's a mountain of training data. Hospitals have spent decades archiving hundreds of millions of scans, and critically, each one has already been read and labeled by an expert radiologist. That gives AI developers exactly what they need, enormous quantities of examples paired with correct answers. Perfect task, perfect data. It's no accident this is where medical AI took off first. So what do these approved tools actually do in practice? Mostly four things. The first, and one of the most valuable, is triage. When a scan comes in showing something life-threatening, a brain hemorrhage or a blood clot in the lungs, the AI can instantly flag it and push it to the top of the radiologist's work list, so the critical case is seen in minutes instead of hours. That reprioritization genuinely saves lives. Second is detection. The AI acts as a tireless second set of eyes, highlighting suspicious spots, an early lung nodule, a subtle fracture, that a busy or tired human might miss. Third is measurement, automatically and consistently quantifying things like tumor size, bone density, or how well the heart is pumping, faster and more reproducibly than manual measurement. And fourth is workflow, simply making the whole reading process quicker and more standardized. Notice these are assistive, the AI flags, measures, and prioritizes, the radiologist decides. This is the perfect place to bust the most famous prediction in medical AI. Around 2016, prominent voices declared that we should stop training radiologists, because AI would replace them within a few years. It's now clear that prediction was wrong, and understanding why is genuinely illuminating. What happened instead is that AI tools took over narrow, specific tasks, while the radiologist's actual job turned out to be far broader than reading one image for one finding. Radiologists integrate the scan with the patient's whole history, handle the endless novel and ambiguous cases no single algorithm covers, communicate with other doctors, guide procedures, and carry the responsibility for the call. Rather than being replaced, radiologists using AI are becoming more productive and, if anything, demand for them has grown. It's the augmentation story from episode 1, proven in the real world. The tool does the task, the human does the job. To keep it honest, let's name the limits. First, these tools are narrow. Despite there being over 1,000 of them, each typically does one specific thing. This one detects brain bleeds, that one measures lung nodules, another flags breast cancer signs. There is no single master AI that reads every scan for everything, it's a large collection of specialists. Second, they can fail, sometimes badly, on images that differ from their training data, a different scanner, a different patient population, an unusual anatomy, and they can generate false alarms that create extra work and anxiety. So everyone needs careful, ongoing validation in the real setting where it's used, not just the lab where it was built. And they remain assistive, the radiologist still reviews the read and owns the final interpretation. Medical imaging is the clearest success story of AI in medicine, genuinely deployed, genuinely useful, precisely because it's used as a powerful assistant, not an unsupervised replacement. This is an educational overview, not medical advice. Pathology is the branch of medicine where a doctor examines your actual tissue and cells under a microscope to diagnose disease, most importantly, cancer. It's one of the highest stakes reads in all of medicine, and it's a natural next frontier for AI after radiology. But it's moving slower, for reasons worth understanding. Let's look at AI in pathology, a smaller, newer, but genuinely promising field. Let's start with why pathology matters so much. When you have a suspicious lump and a biopsy is taken, that tissue goes to a pathologist, who examines it under the microscope. And their read is the answer that everything hinges on: is it cancer or not? If so, what type, and how aggressive? That single determination drives the entire treatment plan, whether you get surgery, chemotherapy, or nothing at all. It is genuinely one of the most consequential judgments in all of medicine, and it demands years of specialized expertise. But notice, like reading an X-ray, examining a tissue slide is at its heart a visual pattern recognition task, spotting the abnormal cells, gauging their features, counting how fast they're dividing. And that, as we've established, is exactly the kind of task AI is built for. So why is pathology behind radiology, if the AI task is similar? The answer is a practical one: getting the image into the computer in the first place. Radiology went fully digital decades ago. A CT or MRI is born as a digital file. Pathology, by contrast, has traditionally been analog, a physical glass slide, viewed through an actual microscope, exactly as it was done a century ago. For AI to analyze a slide, the lab first has to scan that glass slide into an enormous, ultra-high-resolution digital image. A single slide can be billions of pixels. That shift to digital pathology requires expensive scanners, huge data storage, and workflow changes, and many labs around the world are still in the middle of making it. So the bottleneck isn't the AI, it's digitizing the field so the AI has something to work with. As of 2026, there are only a few dozen FDA-authorized pathology AI tools, a fraction of radiology's 1,000+, and that gap is largely about this digital transition. Once a slide is digital, though, AI can do some genuinely impressive things. It can pre-screen slides, flagging the specific regions a pathologist should focus on, so they don't have to scan every millimeter of a huge sample by eye. It can help detect cancer, and grade how aggressive a tumor is, more consistently, reducing the variation you get between different pathologists or the same pathologist on a tired afternoon. It can automate tedious counting, like how many cells are actively dividing, a key marker of aggressiveness. And here's the most futuristic part, AI can sometimes detect subtle molecular and genetic features of a tumor directly from the ordinary image, patterns completely invisible to the human eye that hint at which genetic mutations the cancer carries, or how it might respond to treatment. That's a genuinely new capability, seeing information in the tissue that no human could perceive. So the honest takeaway on AI in pathology is that it's genuinely promising but earlier in its journey, roughly where radiology AI was several years ago. The science works, the bottleneck has been digitizing the field. As more labs adopt digital pathology, expect these tools to grow quickly, and the payoff could be significant: more consistent cancer diagnoses, faster turnaround, and pathologists free to focus on the hardest, most consequential cases. But the same principle from radiology applies here, and it matters even more given the stakes. These are assistive tools that support the pathologist's expert judgment on a diagnosis that shapes someone's entire treatment. The human makes the call. Pathology is a quieter corner of medical AI than the flashy headlines, but it's one of the most important to watch. This is an educational overview of the technology, not medical advice. Beyond reading images, one of AI's biggest opportunities is helping doctors make decisions, catching a diagnosis that's being missed, flagging a patient who's quietly deteriorating, or warning about a dangerous drug combination. This is called clinical decision support, and it's where AI works quietly in the background of care. It's promising, and it's tricky, because here AI is stepping closer to the doctor's core reasoning. Let's look at it honestly. Start with AI's most natural role in decision support: watching data at a scale no human can. A single hospital patient generates a torrent of information, heart rate and blood pressure updating every few seconds, streams of lab results, every medication, every nurse's note. A clinician caring for many patients simply cannot continuously track all of it for all of them. But an AI can. It can monitor every patient's full data stream around the clock, tirelessly, and raise a flag when a concerning pattern emerges. The classic example is sepsis, a life-threatening response to infection where every hour of delay increases the risk of death. Sepsis prediction models watch the subtle combination of rising heart rate, temperature, and lab changes, and can alert the team hours before it becomes obvious. Catching deterioration early, in the flood of data, is one of AI's most valuable and realistic contributions. Clinical decision support takes several forms. There are early warning systems, predicting who's about to deteriorate, develop sepsis, or bounce back to the hospital after discharge, so the team can act preemptively. There's diagnostic assistance, tools that, given a patient's symptoms and data, suggest possibilities the doctor might not have considered, particularly valuable for rare diseases, which any individual physician sees so infrequently they may not recognize them. There are safety checks running silently in the background, catching a dangerous drug interaction, an allergy conflict, or a dosing error before the order ever reaches the patient, preventing exactly the kind of medical error that harms people. And there are guideline nudges, reminding a clinician of the current best evidence step at the moment of decision. Notice the pattern: the AI advises, prompts, and warns, the clinician decides. But this is also where AI gets genuinely hard, and the challenges are as important as the promise. The number one problem is alert fatigue. If a decision support system cries wolf too often, firing alarms that turn out to be nothing, clinicians quickly learn to tune it out entirely, clicking past every warning, including the rare one that's real. A tool that's ignored is worse than useless. Getting the balance right, high enough sensitivity to catch real danger without drowning staff in false alarms, is genuinely difficult. And remember from episode 1 that this is where AI is fundamentally weakest. It's now brushing up against actual clinical reasoning, not just perception. It can suggest something confidently wrong. It can only reason about what's in the data, missing the crucial detail a doctor would get from simply looking at or talking to the patient. So these tools have to be designed and validated with real care, or they can mislead as easily as they help. So the honest takeaway is that clinical decision support is one of AI's most valuable but most delicate roles. At its best, it's a quiet, ever-vigilant co-pilot, never tired, never distracted, catching the deteriorating patient, the missed rare diagnosis, or the dangerous drug combination that slips through the cracks of a busy, overloaded healthcare system. That's a genuinely important safety net. But it only works if it earns clinicians' trust, by being accurate enough to be worth heeding, integrated smoothly into the workflow rather than nagging from the side, and always clearly advisory, keeping the human firmly in command of the decision. Get that right, and AI makes care safer. Get it wrong, and it's just noise that people learn to ignore. It's less flashy than reading scans, but arguably where AI could prevent the most everyday harm. This is an educational overview of the technology, not medical advice. The most successful, fastest-spreading application of AI in medicine right now isn't diagnosing disease or reading scans. It's something far more mundane and far more impactful, writing the notes. Ambient AI Scribes listen to a doctor-patient conversation and automatically draft the medical documentation. It sounds boring. It's quietly revolutionary, a multi-billion-dollar market that barely existed a few years ago. Let's understand why this is medical AI's real killer app. To understand why Ambient Scribes exploded, you first have to understand the problem they solve, one of the most corrosive in modern medicine. Doctors today spend a staggering amount of time not treating patients, but documenting. Every visit has to be typed up into the electronic health record, the notes, the diagnoses, the billing codes, and studies have found physicians often spend 1 to 2 hours on this paperwork for every single hour of actual patient care, much of it at night, in what's grimly called pajama time. This administrative burden is consistently cited as a leading driver of physician burnout, which is at crisis levels. And it poisons the visit itself. Instead of looking at you, the doctor is hunched over a keyboard, typing while you talk. It's bad for doctors, bad for patients, and bad for care. That's the pain Ambient Scribes target. So how does it work? It's elegantly simple from the user's side. With the patient's permission, an app, often just running on the doctor's phone or computer in the room, quietly listens to the natural, back-and-forth conversation of the visit. Under the hood, it combines two AI technologies we've seen mature recently, speech recognition to transcribe the spoken words, and a large language model to understand and summarize them. It then automatically produces a clean, structured medical note, organizing the messy conversation into the proper clinical format of the patient's history, the exam findings, the assessment, and the plan. The doctor's job shifts from typing everything from scratch to simply reviewing, editing, and signing a draft that's already written. The visit becomes a conversation again, with the documentation happening invisibly in the background. The adoption has been explosive, and that tells you it's solving a real problem. The market for Ambient Scribes grew from under $200 million in 2022 to over $5 billion by 2026, a staggering rise. Microsoft, which bought the speech tech company Nuance, offers a leading product used across hundreds of health systems, and a startup called Abridge has won marquee contracts at places like the Mayo Clinic, UCSF, and Yale. Why the stampede? Because unlike a lot of medical AI, the benefit is immediate, obvious, and measurable. Studies, including one in a major medical journal, show these tools meaningfully cut the time doctors spend on documentation, and, most importantly, reduce burnout, giving clinicians their evenings back. This is the rare medical AI that doctors are actively asking for, rather than having imposed on them. When the users pull the technology toward them, you know it's real. But keep the honesty this series is built on, because even the killer app has a catch. Ambient Scribes are not perfect. They can leave out important details from a complex conversation, and they can occasionally hallucinate, inserting a symptom or finding that was never actually said. In a medical record that drives real decisions and follows a patient for life, that matters. So the essential safeguard is that the doctor must carefully review and correct every note before signing it, trusting the draft, but verifying it, never blindly rubber stamping. And there's a broader lesson here for the whole series. The single biggest, fastest, most beloved win for AI in medicine so far came not from replacing the doctor's medical judgment, but from automating the tedious paperwork around it, freeing humans to do the human parts of care. That's a pretty good template for where AI helps most. This is an educational overview of the technology, not medical advice. So far we've focused on AI helping doctors care for patients. But there's another arena where AI may have an even bigger long-term impact, not treating disease, but discovering the treatments themselves. AI in drug discovery is one of the most hyped and most genuinely promising areas in all of biotech. We've explored it in depth in a companion series, so here's the essential overview: what's real, what's proven, and what's still to come. To see why AI matters here, you have to appreciate how broken and brutal traditional drug discovery is. Bringing a single new medicine to market typically takes more than a decade and can cost billions of dollars, and the failure rate is staggering. The overwhelming majority of drug candidates that enter development never make it, collapsing somewhere along the way. Why so hard? Because at its heart, drug discovery is an almost impossibly large search problem. You're looking for exactly the right molecule, one that hits the right biological target, treats the disease, and doesn't harm the patient, out of a space of possible molecules so vast it dwarfs the number of atoms in the solar system. For decades, we searched that space slowly, by expensive trial and error. And searching enormous spaces for the right pattern is, once again, precisely what AI does best. The single most important AI breakthrough in this field is worth understanding, because it's real and it's profound. Proteins are the molecular machines that run your biology, and most drugs work by physically fitting into a target protein, like a key into a lock, which means you need to know that protein's precise three-dimensional shape to design a drug for it. But predicting a protein's shape from its underlying code was one of biology's great unsolved problems, open for 50 years, requiring painstaking lab work that could take years for a single protein. Then AI, most famously a system called AlphaFold, essentially cracked it, predicting protein structures with remarkable accuracy in minutes rather than years. It was a genuine scientific landmark, recognized with a Nobel Prize, and it handed drug designers a foundational tool they'd wanted for half a century. That's not hype, that's a solved problem that used to be impossible. Protein structures are just the start. AI now assists across the whole discovery pipeline. It helps identify which biological target to go after in the first place, sifting mountains of genetic and medical data to find what's actually driving a disease. It can generatively design entirely new candidate molecules from scratch, proposing structures no chemist had thought of. And it can predict, before a single test tube is touched, whether a molecule is likely to be effective, and whether it'll be toxic or have bad side effects. The unifying promise is compelling: do the failing early, cheaply, and virtually, kill the bad candidates on a computer in hours, so that only the most promising few advance to the slow, expensive real-world lab and clinical testing. If it works, it makes the whole brutal process faster, cheaper, and more likely to succeed. So what's the honest scorecard? Genuinely encouraging, with important caveats. The field has its proof points now. The first drugs discovered and designed with heavy AI involvement have reached human clinical trials, and some have posted positive early results, including, notably, a drug where both the target and the molecule were AI-driven. That was an open question a few years ago, it isn't anymore. But no AI-discovered drug has yet completed the full journey all the way to approval and everyday use. That final stretch, the large confirmatory human trials, still takes years and simply cannot be rushed by any algorithm. So the mature reading is that AI is genuinely accelerating the early, discovery end of the pipeline in ways that were impossible a decade ago, but the ultimate proof, curing patients at scale, is still being written. If you want the deep dive, our AI in Drug Discovery series traces it end to end. This is an educational overview of the technology, not medical advice. Your genome, your complete set of DNA, is 3 billion letters long, a book so vast no human could ever read it directly. Precision medicine is the dream of using that book to tailor treatment to each individual. And making sense of 3 billion letters of data is, fundamentally, an AI problem. Let's look at how AI is helping decode the genome and personalize medicine, the promise, and the reality. Let's start with what changed to make this possible. Sequencing a human genome, reading out all 3 billion letters, used to cost a fortune and take years. Today it's fast and cheap, done in a day for a modest price. But that created a new problem, and it's a doozy. A raw genome is just an unimaginably long string of 4 letters, A, T, C, and G. Simply reading it tells you almost nothing. The genuinely hard part is interpretation. Out of your roughly 3 billion letters, you carry millions of variations that make you different from anyone else, and the question is which of those variants actually matter for your health, and which are harmless noise. Finding the few meaningful needles in that vast haystack, and understanding what they mean, is a data problem far beyond human scale. And that's exactly where AI enters. So what does AI actually do with all that genetic data? Several valuable things. It helps classify variants, predicting which of your unusual genetic spellings are likely to cause disease versus which are benign, a judgment that's crucial and genuinely hard. It can estimate disease risk by learning patterns spread across hundreds or thousands of genes at once, so-called polygenic risk, capturing subtle combinations no human could track. And perhaps most powerfully today, in cancer, it helps match patients to treatments. Modern cancer care increasingly involves sequencing the tumor's own DNA to find the specific mutations driving it, and AI helps interpret that genetic profile to point toward the targeted therapy most likely to work for that exact tumor. That's precision medicine in action, treatment guided not by the average patient, but by the individual's own molecular biology. It's one of the most concrete, here-today payoffs of the whole idea. Now the reality check, because precision medicine is one of the most overpromised phrases in health. First, temper the expectations for common diseases. For a few conditions driven by a single powerful gene, genetics is decisive. But for most common diseases, heart disease, diabetes, most cancers, your genes are just one factor among many, tangled up with lifestyle, environment, and luck. So genomic predictions for these are often modest and probabilistic, a nudge to your estimated risk, not a crystal ball, and they're easily oversold. Second, and this is a serious, underdiscussed problem, the genomic databases these AIs learn from overrepresent people of European ancestry, dramatically. That means the predictions can be meaningfully less accurate for everyone else, a real equity issue that risks the technology working better for some populations than others. Good precision medicine has to confront that bias head-on, or it deepens existing health disparities. So the honest takeaway. In specific, high-value areas, AI-driven genomics is genuinely changing medicine right now, matching cancer patients to targeted therapies based on their tumor's DNA, and diagnosing rare genetic diseases in children that once took a years-long odyssey to identify. Those are real, life-changing wins today. For the broader dream, reading your genome to precisely predict and prevent your future common diseases, it's a promising direction that's still maturing, useful but modest, and not yet the sweeping personalized medicine revolution the marketing describes. As sequencing spreads, databases diversify, and the AI improves, that broader promise may grow. But for now, hold it the way we hold everything in this series, real progress in targeted places, hype in the grand claims. Know the difference. This is an educational overview of the technology, not medical advice. When most people think of AI today, they think of ChatGPT and its cousins, the large language models you can simply talk to. These have burst into medicine from both directions, doctors using them as assistants, and millions of patients using them as a new, souped-up version of Dr. Google. This is the most visible and most controversial corner of medical AI. Let's look honestly at what these chatbots can and can't do in health. First, what makes these tools different from everything else in this series? The imaging and pathology AIs we covered are narrow specialists, one does one task. Large language models are general purpose. Trained on a vast swath of human text, they can answer questions, summarize documents, explain concepts, and hold a conversation about almost any topic, including medicine, in fluent natural language. And they made headlines by scoring at or above the passing mark on the medical licensing exams that doctors take, which set off a wave of both excitement and alarm about AI doctors. But that headline needs immediate context, because it's misleading. Passing a multiple-choice exam, where the relevant facts are neatly presented, is a very different thing from safely caring for a real, messy, non-multiple choice human being. Impressive test scores are not the same as clinical competence, and conflating the two is where a lot of the hype comes from. So where are language models genuinely useful in medicine? For clinicians, quite a lot, as an assistant, not an oracle. They're excellent at drafting documentation and patient letters, at summarizing a long, messy medical record into the key points, at translating dense medical jargon into plain language a patient can understand, and as a knowledgeable brainstorming partner to bounce ideas off, reminding a doctor of a possibility they hadn't considered. These are real time savers that play to the technology's strength, working with language. For patients, there's genuine value too. Used well, a language model can help you understand a confusing diagnosis, make sense of your lab results in plain English, and prepare good questions to actually ask your doctor. For a lot of people, it's a more patient, more understandable, and less judgmental place to get health information than a frantic web search. That's a real benefit, with real caveats, which we have to talk about. Now the dangers, and they are serious enough that they need to be said plainly. The biggest is hallucination. Large language models can generate completely false information, a made-up drug interaction, a wrong dose, a fabricated fact about a disease, and deliver it in the same fluent, authoritative, confident tone as a correct answer. There's no warning label on the wrong ones. In casual use that's annoying, in a health decision it can be genuinely dangerous. And remember what these models fundamentally are, pattern-based text predictors, with no real understanding of medicine, no ability to examine you, no knowledge of your complete history, and no accountability if they're wrong. They can be confidently, catastrophically mistaken. So the essential rule for everyone, a chatbot is a tool for understanding and preparing questions, it is not a doctor, and you should never use it to self-diagnose a serious symptom or make a medical decision. Use it to become a more informed patient, then take what you've learned to a real professional. Always consult a qualified professional. So let's land this fairly, holding both truths. Large language models are, without doubt, a genuinely useful and important new tool in medicine, for drafting, summarizing, explaining, translating, and informing. For clinicians they save time, for patients they can demystify a scary, jargon-filled world. That value is real and it's growing fast, and dismissing it would be as foolish as overtrusting it. But they are an assistant, not an authority, a knowledgeable, articulate, and sometimes confidently wrong assistant whose output must be verified by a human who actually knows. The right posture is to embrace what they're good at, language, explanation, drafting, while never outsourcing the actual medical judgment to them. Powerful helper, unreliable oracle. Keep that distinction, and these tools become a genuine asset rather than a hidden hazard. This is an educational overview of the technology, not medical advice. Not all medical AI is about diagnosis. Some of the most impactful applications are the least glamorous, running the hospital more efficiently, and watching over patients continuously, including at home. Better logistics and monitoring don't make headlines, but they save real money, free up scarce resources, and catch problems early. Let's look at AI in the machinery of healthcare, and in the growing world of continuous monitoring. Start by thinking of a hospital not just as a place of medicine, but as one of the most complex logistical operations imaginable. At any moment it's juggling hundreds of beds, the schedules of thousands of staff, precious operating room time, expensive equipment, and constant flows of supplies and patients, all of which have to be coordinated in real time, around the clock, with lives in the balance. And when this machinery runs inefficiently, the consequences aren't abstract. It shows up as patients waiting hours in overcrowded emergency rooms, as surgeries delayed for lack of a bed, as ambulances diverted, as staff stretched too thin. Optimizing this fantastically complex system is a data and prediction problem, forecasting demand, matching resources to needs, smoothing the flow, and it's a natural, if unglamorous, fit for AI. Fixing the plumbing of healthcare may not be exciting, but it directly affects whether you get care quickly. So what does operational AI actually do? It predicts and optimizes the flow of the hospital. It forecasts patient demand, anticipating how many people will come through the emergency room, or when beds will free up, so managers can arrange staffing and capacity before the crunch, rather than scrambling during it. It optimizes scheduling of operating rooms, staff shifts, and equipment, squeezing out the wasted gaps and idle time that plague these systems. It manages the supply chain, predicting what medications and materials will be needed where, so critical items don't run out and expensive ones don't expire unused. It even tackles small but costly problems like appointment no-shows, flagging which bookings are likely to be missed so the slots can be double-booked or filled. None of this touches a diagnosis, it's pure efficiency, but multiplied across a whole health system, it frees up enormous resources and gets patients care faster. The other big, fast-growing frontier is continuous monitoring, extending the hospital's watchful eye beyond its walls. Inside the hospital, AI monitors patients around the clock, as we discussed with early warning systems. But increasingly, that monitoring is moving to the home. Wearable devices and remote sensors now track people's vital signs continuously in daily life, with AI sifting the data for warning signs. The everyday example is already on millions of wrists, a smartwatch that detects an irregular heart rhythm, like atrial fibrillation, and prompts the wearer to see a doctor. That's medical AI in your pocket, catching a dangerous condition that previously might only have been found by luck during a clinic visit. Remote monitoring lets people with chronic conditions be watched over from home, catching a downturn early and keeping them out of the hospital. It's shifting medicine from occasional snapshots toward a continuous, always-on picture of health. So the takeaway on this quieter side of medical AI is that it's among the most practical and widely deployed of all. It doesn't make headlines the way AI diagnosing cancer does, but improving hospital efficiency and enabling continuous monitoring delivers real, scalable value, better access, lower costs, and problems caught earlier, at home, before they become emergencies. That's a lot of good done invisibly. Of course, the cautions from this series still apply. Monitoring systems can flood people with false alarms or breed anxiety through over-monitoring. All that continuous personal health data raises serious privacy questions about who sees it and how it's used. And there's a values question lurking in operational AI. Efficiency must ultimately serve patients and care, not just cut budgets. Handled well, though, this unglamorous machinery may quietly improve more lives than the flashier applications. This is an educational overview of the technology, not medical advice. We've covered where AI helps in medicine. Now the essential counterweight, how it fails, and why those failures can be uniquely dangerous in healthcare. An AI recommending the wrong movie is trivial. An AI contributing to the wrong diagnosis or treatment can harm a patient. Understanding the specific ways medical AI goes wrong isn't anti-AI, it's exactly what's needed to use it safely. Let's look at the three big risks. The first big risk is bias, and it's best understood as a mirror problem. AI learns from historical data. In medicine, that's decades of real-world records, images, and outcomes. But that historical data reflects the real world, with all its inequities, gaps, and blind spots. So an AI trained on it doesn't just learn medicine, it learns our biases and can amplify them at scale. Concretely, if a diagnostic tool was trained mostly on patients of one sex, or one ethnicity, or one age group, it may work beautifully for them and noticeably worse for everyone else, missing disease or misjudging risk in the underrepresented groups. There have been real examples of algorithms that performed worse for certain populations, or that used flawed proxies that disadvantaged some patients. The danger is subtle precisely because the AI looks objective and data-driven, while quietly encoding old inequities. Fixing this requires deliberately diverse data and rigorous testing across groups. It does not happen by accident. The second big risk we've touched on but must confront directly, confident errors, including what's called hallucination. AI systems, and language models especially, can generate information that is simply false, a fabricated drug interaction, an invented dosage, a misread finding, and present it with complete, fluent confidence. This is uniquely hazardous in medicine for a specific reason. A human expert who's unsure will usually signal it, they'll hedge, say I'm not certain, or ask for another opinion. AI typically doesn't. It delivers the wrong answer in exactly the same calm, authoritative tone as the right one, with no flicker of doubt to warn you. And research has found that even medical specialized AI models still hallucinate, sometimes making reasoning errors on information they technically know. In a field where a wrong dose or a missed contraindication can be fatal, an eloquent, confident, wrong answer is a serious safety threat. This is the core reason human verification of AI output is non-negotiable in medicine. The third big risk is the black box problem. Many of the most powerful AI systems are, by their nature, opaque, they can give you an answer without being able to explain, in human terms, why. The reasoning is buried in millions of mathematical parameters, not a traceable line of logic. In many settings that's tolerable. In medicine, it's genuinely problematic. Doctors are trained and required to justify their decisions, to themselves, to colleagues, to patients. If an AI flags a patient as high risk but can't say why, how does the clinician know whether to trust it, or how to act on it? If it's wrong, how do you catch the flaw or challenge it? And patients deserve to understand the reasoning behind decisions about their own bodies. An unexplainable answer is hard to trust, hard to verify, and hard to hold accountable, which is why a whole field of explainable AI is trying to pry these boxes open, so the machine can show its work, not just its verdict. So how should we hold all this? Not as a case against medical AI, the benefits throughout this series are real, but as the essential instruction manual for using it responsibly. Bias, hallucination, and opacity are not reasons to reject these tools, they're the precise reasons to deploy them with care. That means training on deliberately diverse data and testing across every patient group. It means never letting AI output go unverified by a human who knows. It means demanding transparency and the ability to challenge a machine's call. And it means keeping clinicians firmly in the loop, using AI as a checked and supervised assistant rather than an unquestioned authority. The goal is medical AI used with eyes wide open, harnessing its genuine strengths in perception and scale, while actively guarding against its specific, well-understood failure modes. Clear-eyed adoption, not blind faith and not blanket fear. That's the whole ballgame. This is an educational overview of the technology, not medical advice. Given all the risks we just covered, a natural question follows: who's making sure medical AI is safe? How does an algorithm go from a lab to being trusted with your health? This is the world of regulation, less exciting than the technology, but it's the foundation that determines whether we can actually trust any of it. And AI poses genuinely new challenges to a system built for pills and scalpels. Let's understand how medical AI gets approved. Let's start with the basic framework. When a piece of AI is used to inform a medical decision, to diagnose disease, flag a finding, or guide treatment, it isn't treated as ordinary software. Legally, it becomes a medical device, in a category regulators call software as a medical device. And that means it falls under the same kind of oversight as a new drug, a pacemaker, or a surgical tool. In the United States, that's the FDA, other countries have their equivalents. So before a diagnostic AI can be sold and used in the clinic, it generally has to be evaluated and cleared by the regulator, demonstrating that it actually does what it claims, safely. This is why, as we noted, there are over 1,500 FDA-cleared AI algorithms, each one went through this gate. The upside is real oversight, the framework exists, and it's being used at scale. But AI breaks some of the assumptions that framework was built on. Here's the core challenge: AI breaks the assumptions the regulatory system was designed around. Traditionally, you approve a device by testing a fixed, unchanging product. A pill has the same chemistry forever, a scalpel stays a scalpel. You test it once, thoroughly, and it stays what it was. But AI is different in a way that matters enormously: it can learn and change. A model can be updated, retrained on new data, and start behaving differently than the version that was approved, potentially better, potentially worse. How do you regulate something that doesn't hold still? Regulators are actively wrestling with this, developing approaches for monitoring AI over its whole lifecycle rather than just at a single launch moment. There's a second gap too: approval mostly evaluates whether the finished tool performs on test cases, but it's much harder to scrutinize the messy training data it learned from, or the opaque reasoning inside the black box. The old model assumed you could inspect the product. With AI, a lot of what matters is hidden. There's a newer wrinkle that's especially thorny: generative AI, the chatbots. A narrow tool with a well-defined output: does this scan show a bleed, yes or no, is testable. You can run it on thousands of cases and measure how often it's right. But a general-purpose language model can produce essentially infinite different outputs, saying almost anything in response to almost any input. How do you validate that? You can't possibly test every question a doctor or patient might ask it. This is genuinely uncharted territory for regulators. As language model-powered tools creep into clinical software, summarizing records, answering questions, drafting notes that inform care. Agencies are still working out how to evaluate something whose behavior can't be exhaustively pinned down in advance. There's real concern about generative AI quietly entering medicine faster than the frameworks to govern it, which is exactly why the human verification safeguards we keep stressing matter so much in the meantime. So the takeaway on regulation is that it's the unglamorous but essential machinery that turns a clever algorithm into something we can responsibly trust with human health. It's the answer to who's making sure this is safe, imperfect, and racing hard to keep up with a technology evolving faster than any rulebook, but real and improving. Encouragingly, regulators haven't been asleep. They've cleared these tools by the thousand and are actively adapting their methods for AI's moving target nature. For you, as a member of the public, the practical lesson is this: legitimate medical AI is cleared by regulators, monitored over time, and deployed under professional oversight. That's what makes it trustworthy. So be appropriately skeptical of any health AI product that skips those steps, that's marketed directly to you with grand claims and no oversight, or that asks you to trust it with a serious decision on its own authority. Trust in medical AI has to be built and verified, never simply assumed. This is an educational overview of the technology, not medical advice. We'll close this series by looking ahead, carefully, without the sci-fi and without the doom. AI is going to reshape medicine, but probably not in the ways the loudest headlines predict. So let's separate the plausible near future from the fantasy, and end with the realistic picture of where AI in medicine is genuinely heading, and what it means for you. So what does the realistic near future actually look like? Not androids in white coats. The most likely future is quiet and unglamorous, AI becoming an invisible layer woven underneath normal medical care. When your scan is read, an AI will have pre-screened it. When your doctor writes your note, an AI will have drafted it. When your prescription is entered, an AI will have silently checked it for dangerous interactions. When you're in the hospital, an AI will be watching your vitals for early trouble. You often won't even know it's there, and that's the point. Rather than one dramatic AI doctor, we get 1,000 small, specialized assists making the existing system a bit faster, a bit safer, and a bit less overwhelmed. The revolution is real, but it arrives as quiet integration, not as a single sci-fi leap. Most of medicine's AI future is boring in the best possible way. That said, there are genuinely exciting possibilities worth being hopeful about, grounded ones. The biggest is a shift toward catching disease far earlier. Between continuous monitoring, better detection in scans and slides, and blood tests that hunt for the faintest signals, medicine could move from reacting to advanced disease toward catching it at its earliest, most curable stage, which would save enormous numbers of lives. Another is expanding access. AI could help bring expert-level interpretation of a scan or a symptom to rural clinics, poorer countries, and places with too few specialists, potentially democratizing quality care that's currently concentrated where the experts are. And perhaps the most human hope of all, by taking over the perception and the paperwork, AI could give doctors back their time and attention, so the irreplaceably human parts of medicine, listening, comforting, judging, connecting, get more room, not less. Technology handling the machine work so people can be more present. That's a future worth building toward. It's just as important to set aside the fantasies, because they distort expectations and investment. The vision of an autonomous AI doctor that fully replaces physicians, that independently reasons through any case, handles the novel and the ambiguous, weighs values and uncertainty, and takes responsibility for the outcome, is not close, and it may not even be the right goal. Here's why. As we've seen all series, medicine is not merely a pattern-matching problem that better algorithms will simply solve. It's shot through with genuine reasoning about novel situations, with ethical judgment, with communication and trust, with sitting in uncertainty, and with accountability for a human life. These are precisely the things today's AI does not possess. It's a brilliant perceiver, not a wise judge. So the mature expectation isn't AI replacing the doctor, it's AI plus doctor consistently outperforming either alone. The future of medicine is human, augmented, not human, replaced. Anyone selling you the latter is selling hype. So let's bring the whole series home. AI in medicine is neither the miracle nor the menace that the headlines take turns proclaiming. The honest reality, which we've traced area by area, is more grounded and more useful than either extreme. It's a powerful and rapidly improving set of tools, genuinely transformative at specific tasks like reading images and drafting notes, genuinely limited at reasoning, judgment, and the human heart of care. The whole art is knowing the difference. Used with clear eyes, leaning hard on what AI does brilliantly, guarding vigilantly against its bias, hallucination, and opacity, and keeping skilled, accountable humans firmly in charge, this technology can make medicine faster, safer, more accessible, and more humane. That's not science fiction, and it's not hype. It's the achievable, evidence-based future, and it's already quietly beginning. Thank you for watching this series on AI in medicine. I hope it's helped you see past the noise. This is an educational overview of the technology, not medical advice.